As long as my phone still has some charge left, I feel compelled to write this down and share it with all of you, so you don't end up making the same mistake I did. I no longer exist, at least not in the reality I once knew. I've been riding this train that seems to transcend both time and space for the past 3 days, and I'm still struggling to understand how it all happened. I know this probably sounds like confused rambling to those of you reading, so let me explain. It all began when I got off work 3 days ago. I had to stay late and finally finished around midnight. I don't currently own a car, and the distance from my place to work is too far to walk or bike. I also don't take the bus. It's too slow, and I've learned that taking the train is much quicker for my commute. When I arrived at the subway, I sat down on a bench and waited for my train. While sitting there, I scrolled through my social media, looking at the happy moments shared by friends and family. My sister had posted pictures of her family's vacation in Venice, Italy. A few scrolls later, I saw that my old high school friend had just proposed to his girlfriend of 3 years. The more I scrolled, the more I realized how alone and unaccomplished I was. I don't have a girlfriend, nor a family outside of my parents and sister. I haven't done much with my life. After high school, I joined the army but was dishonorably discharged after a year for an altercation with a second lieutenant. After that, I hopped between various low-paying jobs until landing my current desk job. It doesn't pay well, but it's a step up from my previous fast food and cashier gigs. Still, at 28 years old, it feels like life is slipping by, and I'm not really living it. Caught up in my self-pity, the train finally arrived. I stood up, boarded, and sat on the bench closest to the door. As soon as I sat down, I noticed something odd. No one else was in my carriage. This wasn't normal, even at this late hour. I've never seen an empty carriage before. Feeling uneasy, I got up and peered through both door windows into the other carriages. Still, they were all empty too. This unsettled me, and I briefly considered getting off and taking a taxi home. But I quickly brushed off the anxiety and told myself, at least there won't be any late-night weirdos to deal with. The train started moving, and I relaxed a bit, pulling out my phone to play my puzzle game. Then, the lights in the carriage flickered. It startled me, but I assumed it was just poor maintenance, typical of American infrastructure. However, after flickering for about a minute, the lights went completely out. It was pitch black for at least 30 seconds, and I could only see the dim glow of my phone screen. Just as I was about to turn on my flashlight, a blinding flash of light suddenly burst through the darkness and into my eyes. The intensity of the light disoriented me, and just as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished. While I was still trying to regain my vision, a sudden surge of voices filled the air around me. And then, I was hit with an overpowering smell, like musk, the kind you'd get after diving into a pool filled with the jerseys and jockstraps of football players who had just finished a summer game in Alabama. When my vision finally returned, I realized the carriage was now packed with people. I was stunned by how quickly it went from being completely empty to being filled with strangers. I jumped back with a yell, drawing their attention. Everyone stopped and stared at me for a moment, then quickly went back to whatever they were doing. Soon, a kid, probably no older than 13, came up to me, asking to use my phone to call his parents. The kid smelled awful. His long, greasy hair stuck to his forehead, and his face was covered in acne and sweat. Before I could respond, a woman in her 20s with curly brown hair came up behind him and scolded him for scaring me. With an apologetic look on his face, the kid went back to his seat. The woman followed him, her gaze lingering on him before she turned to me and extended her hand for a handshake. "Luna. Hi, I'm Luna. What's your name?" After a brief hesitation, I shook her hand. James. "Luna, nice to meet you, James. I just wish it were under better circumstances." Still trying to process everything, I asked. "James, yeah. Can you explain what the hell is going on right now?" "Luna, no need for that kind of language. I understand this is scary, but there are kids around." I looked around and noticed a woman with a child sitting to my immediate right, staring at me disapprovingly. I quickly apologized and turned back to Luna. "James, can you please explain how everyone got on this train and what's going on?" Luna frowned. "Luna, well, honestly, I don't fully understand it either. I've been on this train for 2 weeks, and from what I've gathered, everyone ended up here after getting on a train that was empty. Then the lights went out, and when they came back on, we were no longer alone. Sounds like what you just went through, Sue. After processing her words, I replied, James, yeah, that's exactly what just happened. Luna smiled. Luna, yep, I remember going through that. James, wait, you've been here for 2 weeks? Have you not gotten to your stop? Luna chuckled. Luna, funny thing, I don't think my stop exists anymore. And I'm willing to bet yours doesn't either. Her comment sent a wave of unease through me. James, what do you mean by that? Luna, I mean exactly what I said. After you experienced that flash of light, you've crossed into a different plane of reality. At this point, her words sounded insane to me. But before I could respond, she cut me off. Luna, I know it sounds crazy, but can you think of any other explanation? You got on an empty train. The lights went out, and when they came back on, you found yourself in a full carriage with people from all walks of life. I sat with her words for a moment, and eventually, I had to admit I had no idea how any of this had happened. I couldn't comprehend how I'd gone from being on my way home to suddenly being in this strange new existence. James, okay, so if what you're saying is true, how do I get out of here? Should I get off and catch a train going the other ways? Before I could finish, she interrupted me. Luna, there's no going back. And trust me, you don't want to get off this train. I had to ask the obvious question. James, why not? After a brief silence, Luna seemed uncomfortable. Luna, like I said, we're in a different reality. None of the stops exist in our old world, and every stop is a game of Russian roulette. In my short time here, I've seen stops that look like paradise and others not so much. She paused, staring into an empty space. James, what's wrong with one of those stops? Luna looked uneasy, but spoke anyway. Luna, one stop I saw looked like hell, a lake of fire with thousands of people screaming in agony. There were flying demons the size of small airplanes. It was like a nightmare. This was too much to process. 1 minute I'm heading home, and the next, I'm learning that hell could be a real place I might accidentally end up in. As I tried to gather my thoughts, the train slowed down, and the intercom crackled. Intercom, next stop, Pearl Wave Bay. For passengers of carriage 48, please ensure 5 people disembark. If 5 volunteers don't step forward, we will send the authorities to decide who leaves. The voice was disturbingly calm. I glanced out the window as we arrived at Pearl Wave Bay. It looked beautiful, almost like the cover of a luxury resort brochure, sparkling water, empty beach chairs, and Caribbean-style huts. It seemed like a dream location, but Luna looked concerned. James, what's wrong? This looks like a great place for a vacation. Luna, that's the problem. It looks nice, but you can never tell if it's a trap or just a nice beach. James, trap?
What are you talking about?
Before she could answer, I saw 4 people from the next carriage get off. A family, a father, mother, and 2 children, seemed hesitant, but they stepped off the train. The intercom crackled again. Intercom, carriage 48, for have gotten off. You have 30 seconds to volunteer one more, or the authorities will choose. The voice now held a note of urgency. I watched the family, all looking clean and fresh, move away from the train. Suddenly, the intercom returned. Intercom, authority approaching carriage 48 to remove a passenger. The family turned, looking at the carriage they had just exited. I saw a massive figure, about 8 feet tall, approaching. It was humanoid, but it had no nose or mouth, just 2 dark crimson eyes. It was dressed in an old train conductor uniform. As it passed by the family and entered carriage 48, all hell broke loose. A few moments later, the authorities stepped out, dragging a young woman, her leg twisted and broken. As it continued toward the front of the train, the woman clutched her severed arm in shock and pain. The father tried to charge at the authority, but was effortlessly stopped and executed with horrifying precision. The children screamed, and the mother held them tightly, her face frozen in terror. The train began to move again as the authority returned to the engine, ignoring the chaos it had just caused. I looked at Luna, who seemed resigned to the horror around us. James, who or what is the authority? Luna, you'll find out soon enough. I watched the family through the window as we passed them, and I could see the raw, untamed fear in the young woman's eyes. The intercom crackled again. Intercom, let's hope our former passengers enjoy their stay at Pearl Wave Bay. Luna turned away from me, her face full of sorrow, and I turned back to face the horizon. Before I could make sense of what had just happened, the train entered a tunnel, cutting off my view of the distant water. Our journey continued with a few other stops, snowy landscapes, forest villages, and mountain cabins. No one had to depart after Pearl Wave Bay, but I could feel the tension mounting. Our carriage was nearly full, and we were likely next in line. My phone battery is at 78%, so I'll stop here. Please learn from my experience. If you ever get on a train with no one else aboard, get off immediately. On January 12th, 2024, my otherwise happy, healthy, and successful 43-year-old life was forever altered by a single Friday night. This is a story about party drugs, but it's also a journey that could have turned deadly, one I never could have imagined, even in my wildest dreams. Some may see my experience as a case study at the crossroads of brain science, medicine, pharmaceuticals, and policy. Others might view it as a terrifying dive into the extremes of the human mind. For me, telling this story here, now, 10 months later, serves as therapy as I try to piece together the fragments of a shattered life and heart, crafting a broken mosaic. Here it is. At my brother's 50th birthday in Cabo, Mexico, while celebrating with other guests, I was offered cocaine. Although I wasn't a regular user, I wasn't inexperienced either. I'm a typical millennial in that I've never actively sought drugs, but am not afraid to try something passed around by friends. For context, I'm a well-educated, responsible guy with multiple advanced degrees. I run a small, thriving international business. This isn't meant to boast, just to highlight that until January, I led a drama-free life that was successful by any standard. I'm also naturally an understated middle child, and attracting attention or encountering strange situations wasn't my style. Up until that night, I'd coasted through life without anything major going wrong. Now in my early 40s, my partying days were long behind me, and January marked my first encounter with party drugs in over a decade, since business school. Over several hours at Bagatelle, where the first dinner of the 3-day celebration was held, I snorted a dozen or more lines of coke while sipping rum. The scene was festive, if excessive, with our group of 40 dancing on the long birthday table, stepping over dinner plates while waiters poured magnums of champagne directly into our mouths like communion. Not a typical Friday night, but everyone was having a blast celebrating my brother. So, chemically speaking, cocaine and alcohol were the first substances to enter my bloodstream. As midnight neared, a banker friend handed me what was purported to be MDMA, brought from San Francisco. I had tried Molly twice before, once at a wedding in Prague and again at a club in Aruba, and had good experiences both times. That night, though, I didn't particularly feel like taking it, especially since I was tired from an early flight out of DC. I almost declined. But your brother only turns 50 once, so I didn't overthink it. I split the cap in half and swallowed what I assumed would be a light dose, continuing the party. It turned out to be the biggest mistake of my life, the one that changed everything. Even Dostoevsky couldn't have predicted what would unfold next. When mixed with the cocaine, MDMA immediately had a negative impact. In my 2 previous experiences, I hadn't mixed the two, and this time, I felt overwhelming anxiety unlike anything I'd ever experienced. After an hour in that state, I had to leave the after-party. I felt too uneasy to keep talking with anyone. When I returned to my room at Esperanza, sleep eluded me. This wasn't a surprise, since cocaine typically makes it hard to wind down, so I lay there awake until I finally passed out after sunrise. By the time I woke up that afternoon, the anxiety hadn't subsided. I stayed in my room, skipping day 2 of the celebration, hoping the unease would eventually pass. I'd never dealt with a mood disorder or taken psychotropic medication, so this was entirely new territory. Day 3 came and went, with me holed up in my room while my phone buzzed with messages about the final day of the birthday bash. And then the real problem started. On the third night, I couldn't sleep, not even a wink. By January 16th, day 4, I flew to Mexico City for routine work obligations. But the same pattern continued that night, and the night after, no sleep. After the 6th night without rest, barely managing to get through what would have been routine commitments in Mexico City, I returned home to DC, hoping that being in my own bed would bring some relief. Nothing changed when I got home. A 7th sleepless night became an 8th, with only an hour or two of fragmented rest, constantly jolted awake by anxiety. It was as if my brain had gotten stuck in fight or flight mode with no way to switch it off. In my previous life, a restless night, say before a big speech or a tough meeting, would leave me exhausted the next day, but I'd always catch up on sleep. However, catch-up sleep never came with this strange MDMA-induced insomnia. I never felt sleepy, no matter how many nights passed. After 2 weeks of this, I knew something serious was happening. I saw my family doctor, who referred me to a psychiatrist, marking the first time I'd ever sought psychiatric help. He began treating me with basic sleeping pills, starting with trazodone. They didn't help, and I was switched to stronger medications. This process continued for the next month as I worked with a growing team of psychiatrists and sleep specialists who prescribed progressively stronger medications. I tried every type of sedative available, from orexin inhibitors to benzodiazepines, beta blockers, antipsychotics, and even anesthetics. I had blood work done, underwent a sleep study where I slept only 50 minutes, had an MRI and EEG, and hired a CBT coach. Nothing provided answers or relief. By the 3-month mark, I had tried over 40 different medications, both on-label and off-label prescriptions. Here's how it works with so-called psych drugs. When used for mood disorders like depression or anxiety, these drugs take weeks, sometimes months, to work. But when used off-label for sleep, they either work or don't on the first night, with diminishing effects over time. That's how I was able, under medical supervision, to try every sleep aid available over 90 days, hoping for a breakthrough. I even spent $1,000 out of pocket for a new designer drug called Quviviq, which had helped Matthew Perry sleep, though it wasn't covered by insurance. It didn't work. Against the sleepless nights, I tried to wear myself out with daily workouts and miles of running outside, hoping to tire myself enough to sleep. I unintentionally got into the best shape of my life, though no one knew the dark reason behind my transformation. Still, nothing changed at night. Little by little, I eliminated potential stressors from my life, trying to find anything that might help. But I pushed all intensity and passion from my personal life into the background, shutting out love, a choice that haunts me. At work, I kept pushing through, trying to manage my company while hiding my increasingly drained appearance and mental state. Anyone who saw me during that time will remember my eyes, which were sunken beyond anything seen in movies. When I couldn't function, I told friends and colleagues I had migraines, instead of admitting I wasn't sleeping. I couldn't share the source of my distress, a party drug I was too ashamed to talk about outside of medical circles. So I suffered in silence. Eventually, the toll became too much, and I had to take a leave of absence from the job I loved. I canceled all travel, reassigned responsibilities, and tried to streamline my life. Still, the sleeplessness persisted. I never yawned or felt tired, and all I could manage were a few hours of medicated sleep. I spent tens of thousands of dollars seeing top specialists within a 4-hour radius of DC, but none of them had any answers. I went to ERs, begging for a coma for just one night of rest, like Jordan Peterson had done in Russia, but I couldn't get past triage because I wasn't suicidal. I tried everything, from a calm routine to perfect sleep hygiene, but nothing worked. By mid-April, I checked myself into a private hospital residency for 24-hour care, hoping to finally get some relief. This was a huge step for me, as I had never taken sick leave in the past 2 decades. At a facility in Texas, I was prescribed Lexapro, an SSRI that surprisingly helped me sleep for 2 weeks. I felt like my life was returning to normal, and I was filled with gratitude. But as I adjusted to the SSRI, my insomnia returned. I switched to other serotonin modulators, but nothing worked. Lexipro's temporary success became a bitter memory. In June, I finally got an appointment with Dr. Christopher Early at Johns Hopkins, the chief sleep neurologist, who confirmed that the combination of cocaine and MDMA had caused a rare and severe reaction in my brain. He explained that I had experienced a serotonin syndrome, a neurotoxic reaction that damaged my serotonin system, the key regulator of sleep. Dr. Early couldn't say if I would ever recover, but he agreed to treat me on an experimental basis, ordering a sleep study to gather more data. As July approached, marking 6 months of insomnia, I felt hopeless. I had spent over $200,000 on treatments, but no one could cure my sleeplessness. Eventually, I reached a breaking point. The medications I was given had warnings about causing depression and suicidal thoughts, which only amplified my despair. The lack of sleep and the side effects from the drugs created a deadly cycle. By July, I had lost everything: my job, my health, and my sense of self. I couldn't think, engage, or feel joy. I was a shell of the person I once was. At the end of my 3rd week in the retreat, I gave up, desperate for an end. At the end of my 3rd week in the retreat, I gave up. Desperate for an end to my suffering, I resorted to an unthinkable action. I'd been to so many therapists, psychiatrists, and specialists, but no one had helped me. As I reached for the knife to end the pain, something in me snapped. I asked for help, and my body heard me. The next day, I felt like I'd woken up from a dark spell. I took the plunge and gave up. It's the only way forward. Shrieks echoed from above, signaling an emergency as doctors rushed to the stairwell from every floor. With my glazed eyes fixed in place, I peered down, unable to comprehend that against all odds, I still had a pulse. Somehow, surviving a 3-floor fall headfirst didn't end my life, unlike what happened to fellow musical spirit Liam Payne recently in Argentina. But when the back of my head slammed into concrete, it shifted my vision, causing strabismus, an effect that makes 3D vision feel strange, and gave me a condition called acquired aphantasia, which meant losing my ability to visualize. Now, when I close my eyes, I'm blind. Every memory's image vanished on impact. I can't recall what anyone looks like, can't imagine the future, can't focus on my reflection in a mirror, struggle to read without vocalizing the words, can't navigate without GPS, and a multitude of other ways my imagination has disappeared, reshaping who I am. For someone who was always told they were visual, this loss feels like losing myself. In a cruel twist of fate, this new neurological condition is rare, much like the MDMA-induced insomnia I had before. Acquired aphantasia from head injuries is unusual because rear occipital damage is less common than frontal lobe injuries, which are more frequent in car crashes. So now, I'm walking through this new chapter, once again, in the dark, flying blind, probably forever. After my fall, hospital lawyers, like sharks smelling blood, flocked to the scene to protect their interests. To shield themselves, they threw everything at me. Strapped to a gurney, I was sent to a ward and confined for 40 days. Much of that time was spent on 1:1 observation, essentially solitary confinement with a guard always by my side, even in the shower, even in bed. Still dazed from the collision with the ground, I thought of Moses in the desert. I began speaking to my guard, an alter ego next to me, much like the voice in the burning bush. She was Sam. Once I regained strength to walk, I circled endlessly. Sam would occasionally share news from the outside world. An assassin had shot Trump at a rally, but the bullet only grazed his ear. A massive bridge across the Chesapeake had collapsed, sending cars into the water like stones sinking in a pond. My world, both inside and out, had turned into magical realism, like 100 years of solitude. Fiction blurred into reality within this Borgesian maze. My sleepless existence had transformed into a requiem for a dream. Given my knack for turning medical facilities into disaster zones, the ward leadership feared a lawsuit. So I was under constant surveillance, 24/7. My life had become paper scrubs, paper spoons, rubber mattresses, plastic pillows, no sheets, metal toilets, no lids, a Stockholm shower with no curtain. Daily strip searches. The routine was the same, day after day. I had become their Al Capone, their Hannibal Lecter, but without the Goldberg variations. Their overzealousness didn't matter. The time to save me had already passed before I arrived. I did my time and was eventually released after 6 weeks in mid-August. Since then, I've kept going by planting trees and taking long walks with my dog, Peanut, trying to resist the pull of depression's gravity in ways I never knew possible. Tired from a year without rest, I'm now dealing with the unsettling side effects of my new brain trauma. I often think about my life before this began, the dreams I had to abandon along the way. I don't understand why any of this happened, and I still can't sleep much. Most recently, I've spent the past few months fighting poison with poison, undergoing every brain reset treatment known, including 6 weeks of TMS, 5 weeks of ketamine, and 4 stellate ganglion block injections in my neck, used by the military. And soon I'll be starting tri-weekly electroconvulsive shock therapy under general anesthesia. The only thing missing for Christmas are 2 turtle doves and a partridge in a pear tree. Yet, none of it has worked. My mind is still blank. My heart light has gone out. The stars no longer fill the sky. When I look at everything I've lived through since January, it's so unbelievable it could only be real, not fiction. And now, the sleepless nights that began it all are only the prelude to a stranger chapter I'm still waking up to. I've never been one for melodrama, but I can't help but feel like I've missed out on life's chance, derailing from the wrong track in one fateful night, my train now heading in a completely different direction. After being in control my whole life, I've become a passenger, uncertain of where this new ride will lead. I don't know where this journey in my new brain will end. Fortunately, I can still write, though I've lost the ability to be brief, as you've probably noticed, because of aphantasia. Now, I have to say everything out loud to myself. It's all part of the transformation. The harder they come, the harder they fall. The optimistic version of me from December 2023 feels like a distant character in an old movie. Every moment shines from the past. Between then and now, it's a miracle and a curse that I made it. January 12th will forever represent the last day of my previous life. The story from that one night of party drugs may be one of the most life-altering of all time. I'm the exception, not the rule. But I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. The world is filled with people living in fear from MDMA-induced, lasting insomnia. Here's one story, here's another, all variations on the same theme. Most testimonies are dismissed by enthusiastic users who can't believe the drug they love could harm others. You can't understand it until it happens to you. I never would have, but now I've seen many lives broken by MDMA's dark side. If you look up NIH case reports, you'll find accounts of permanent anxiety disorders and unshakable psychosis brought on by even a single dose of MDMA in otherwise healthy individuals, like I was. Search for long-term come down, LTC, on blogs, and you'll uncover countless heartbreaking stories of MDMA causing enduring neuroses that last months, years, or even forever. People worldwide have reached out to me, sharing how their lives have been shattered. Without a doubt, my case is extraordinary. As Dr. Early said, it was a 1 in a million neurotoxic event. But if I'd known I was gambling with my brain that night, even with odds in the trillions, I would never have taken that pill. I loved life too much to risk it. What it did to my brain eventually stripped away the best parts of me. I'll never be able to make sense of it. I'll always wonder what good was waiting around the corner if I had made a different choice that night. It's too much to think about. I can't explain fate, but I didn't deserve this. No one does. For 999,999 people, the chances are slim. Soon, my story will fade. I would have forgotten it too. Before that night, I never worried about my brain or drugs. I lived a charmed life and got lucky at every turn. Everything just worked. That was my world for 42 unforgettable years. But for the next 1 in a million, maybe my story gives pause before reaching for substances that could alter the mind. We each make our own choices, but from the depths of this abyss, the mind is too powerful a supercomputer to experiment with. It's our universe, and because it surrounds us, it feels unchangeable, like the sun always rising. But the truth is, we don't understand our minds, and we certainly don't know what could throw them off balance permanently. I learned that too late. I wish I didn't have this story to tell. I'd give anything to go back to the moment the pill was in my hand. It's a what-if scenario I've replayed 1,000 times. I can't change the past, but maybe my journey can help someone else's future. People have asked me, did the system fail?
No.
No, MDMA showed me the writing on the wall. That was my choice. And even though it might soon be legal in countries like the US, it's still illegal in Mexico. Ironically, on the morning of January 12th, Mexican authorities seized a CBD lip balm from my bag, a gift I received 3 days earlier for my birthday, bought over the counter in DC. So, there's still no clear consensus on what's safe and what isn't. No, I was treated by countless compassionate doctors who did their best. Too many to name. Most importantly, no, there's no neurobiologist on Earth who understands the human brain. We've barely scratched the surface. How can any doctor be blamed for not finding my silver bullet? On the other hand, did the system fail?
Yes.
Yes, MDMA was originally synthesized by Merck Pharmaceuticals, the same company that made the drugs I later used to fight its damage. You break it, you buy it. Yes, the very medications prescribed to help me sleep ended up causing life-destroying depression. Yes, nurses at the facility lent me a 14-foot cable, knowing I was nearing the breaking point from lack of sleep. Had I brought it myself, it would have been confiscated as a dangerous risk. Yes, I turned myself into an ER in self-induced anoxia, only to be placed in a room next to a 6-story stairwell when an entire trap-proof floor was available in the same hospital for delirium patients. My story is worth sharing, if only because it raises important questions across medicine, policy, pharma, drugs, health, and brain science. But none of these questions matter now. As I sat on a log, replaying the reel of time, I wasn't thinking about any of them. I was thinking about the people and places I love. The story's been told. Moving on. Growing up, my older brother was the daredevil. He'd push me down our steep driveway on a skateboard. He'd take me climbing cranes at night. How is it that I survived so many adventures, but couldn't survive his 50th birthday? We haven't spoken since. It's not his fault. No one knew. I've always been loyal to my company, and the people I've shared it with. They've remained loyal, flying the plane, waiting for my return, never giving up hope. The last thing left to face is my heart. As a kid, I spent summers at Langley Pool, a neighborhood club by the Potomac River. I'd often see an old man, stark naked, walking into the neighboring woods, the path he walked known only to him. For years, he built a half-mile dam out of rocks by hand in the river's rapids, diverting the course of one of America's most famous waterways. His work is still visible on Google Earth, just west of the American Legion Bridge. They called him Crazy Ned. Legend had it he was stuck in an endless loop from a bad drug trip, like the strange case of the frozen addict. Looking back, Ned seemed almost like a biblical omen, a man cursed by a pill to push stones forever against the current. But I never saw the sign. Now the stars, even Carlvin, are all gone out. In the darkness, there's nowhere to hide from my heart. It's been sealed since May, burying memories I'll forever carry. Black car, bright eyes, black boots, 2 smiles, autumn leaves, 2 oaks, white dress, 2 hands, starry nights, 2 a.m., daybreak drives, 2 hearts, midnight melodies, 2 flights, Swiss chocolate, 2 views, dancing kisses, 2 lives, dreamy promises, forever, our dreamland, our world. I was the luckiest. Those who saw shining eyes. I had it all in my hands. But from dream to dreamlessness, dreamland to wasteland, my love at first sight was ripped away, piece by piece, until it vanished, a thief in the night. In 3rd grade, I lived in India. Every day at school, I'd catch glimpses of a little blonde girl with sparkling eyes. She was 2 grades above me, but we shared friends. We wrote secret notes, played spin the bottle, and shared our first kiss. Those were the best days of my childhood. But just as our story was starting, my family had to leave the country, with no warning. At the Delhi airport before our flight, I called her from a payphone to tell her what happened. No one was home. I never got to say goodbye. Her face in the 1990 Embassy school yearbook haunted me for years. Her eyes and flaxen hair became my colors, the colors of her flag, Sweden. I drew it everywhere. Her smile stayed with me long into my teens and beyond. I never let her go. Then, out of nowhere, last year, on a flight from London, she returned, all grown up, majestic and golden, bright like a diamond. Made for me. Her last words, before the sleepless nights stole her away again. I love you unconditionally. In another world, one where I didn't take the pill, we're still together in Dromland. But here, in this parallel universe, it's all gone. As the anniversary of that first night approaches, I can't help but think back to this time last year, strong, healthy, chemical-free, sleeping soundly, my world in motion, the new moon rising, shimmering sea waves. What I thought was the brightest chapter of my life. I'd always heard, from the brightest day, comes the darkest night. Now I know. Sleep is like true love. It finds you when you're not looking. It fills you with dreams. Its melody is a nocturne. And when you lose it, you lose everything. There is one difference. Everyone knows sleep. Few ever know true love. I couldn't have known it then, but I lost both, the same night. One small cap, I barely remember taking, broke my sleep, my world, and my heart. Love-struck became lovesick, but never lovelorn. Because I did it to myself. That's the hardest pill to swallow. This December, every carol echoes a bittersweet reminder of the final weeks of Shining Eyes last year. I miss those days more than you can imagine. Last year's songs are the shooting stars of a light-filled universe, set ablaze, then vanished. I'll never get those stars back, or the shining eyes, or why they slipped away. Here's hoping ECT erases it all, like eternal sunshine of the spotless mind. Meet me in Montauk. For now, red wine and sleeping pills help me reach for your arms. Maybe. I'll see you in the next life. Knock, knock, knock. Man, I just settled in for a nap. It's 2:17 on the clock. Alright, so I lay down 37 minutes ago. But it feels like I just got here. Knock, knock, knock.
Fine.
I roll off the couch and, after a quick check to make sure I'm still wearing pants, I shuffle over to the front door. A blurry figure behind the frosted glass. No truck in sight, so it's probably not a delivery person. Not that they usually knock anyway, they just leave my stuff on the stoop to bake in the sun. Knock, knock, knock. I'm coming, geez. I unlock the deadbolt, but before I even touch the handle, the door swings open. It's Alan something, the neighbor from across the street. It's a cul-de-sac at the end of a small housing development. Only delivery trucks and residents come through here. It's part of the reason Jess and I chose this place. The kids can play in the street. Hi, Mark. Alan beams, like two fishhooks are tugging his cheeks back. His garage door's open. A big HOA violation. But Alan's the one who loves enforcing the HOA rules. So, who do I complain to? His front door is open, too. Everything all right? His grin stretches wider somehow, but his eyes stay cold. Instead of crinkling at the edges, they're as wide as his open garage.
Fine. Great.
Just came over to say hi. Can I come in? He steps inside without waiting for an answer. The couch is a mess from the blanket nest I made, but Alan doesn't seem to notice when he sits down. I glance at his open front door one more time before closing my own. Do you need some things? I ask. Alan is all sharp angles, straight back, bent knees, feet flat on the floor. Hands gripping his thighs, trying and failing to keep still as his thumbs drum, out of sync. His eyes dart around the room like a bird, eventually settling on the TV. What movie is that? I don't know. I was asleep. Again, do you need something? Finally, his eyes lock on mine. No. Is he on something? He doesn't seem drunk. I've never seen him drink. Hard to imagine Alan taking anything that would make him act so jittery. Do you need something? He asks politely. All right, that's it. I've met the minimum social politeness. He's got tea. Wait, he's got blood on his nails. Not much, just around the cuticles. Faint like nail polish he tried to wash off. But it's not nail polish. Alan has 3 daughters, Kelsey, Chloe, and Quinn. I know their names because my daughter never stops talking about them, loves playing with them. And they love playing with her, despite being 2 to 6 years older. They're good kids. It's not nail polish. How are your girls? My www what? My what? His bloodied thumbs drum harder. Your daughters. Alan, are they okay? Ha.
Ha.
Ha ha ha. It wasn't a laugh, just like it wasn't a smile. He said ha 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 like a cartoon character. I'm not sure what's going on with you, but you need to leave right. I don't have any daughters. I grab his wrists and pull him to his feet. You have 3 daughters. Chloe, Kelsey, and Quinn. You need to go see them now. As I guide him like a confused dementia patient toward the door, he mutters, "They're not my daughters. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I don't want to know." What are you talking about? Those 3 girls were never mine. I'm not the most social neighbor. I don't know much about the personal lives of anyone on my street, other than what time they put out their trash, and who keeps their Christmas lights up until February. Damn you, Tim. So, yeah, I didn't know they were adopted. Sue me. Still, it's weird that Ava didn't know. And didn't tell me. She's obsessed with family trees, reading Dawn's family scrapbook all the time. Adoption would intrigue and confuse her, and she definitely would have asked me about it. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Do they know they're adopted? I didn't know I adopted them. We stop at the edge of my front door, staring across the street at his open front door. His open garage door, which is an HOA violation Alan would never ignore. I don't want to know. He's jittery, like he's on an adrenaline rush. I don't want to know. Blood on his fingers. I don't. Which he tried to wash off.
Want to.
Whose blood is it?
No, 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 no.
Alan. Where Chloe, Kelsey, and Quinn? A van turns into the cul-de-sac. A minivan, not a delivery van. Alan's wife. What's her name? Joan? Jan? Through the windshield, I see her press the garage door opener.
Jen?
She pulls into her drive, distracted and confused by the closing garage door.
Hits the button again.
What's she going to find inside, Alan? Not sure if he didn't hear me or if I didn't actually say it out loud. He stares at the door closing behind his wife's car. Jeannie. That's her name. Jeannie walks past the open front door, pauses as the breeze ruffles her hair. Then she notices something in the corner of her eye. On the ground. I can't see it, but I'm afraid she'll see it every time she closes her eyes from now on. Jeannie screams. Alan, what did you do to your kids? I told you, they're not my kids. They're hers. I shouldn't be sharing this, and if the right people find out, the consequences could be severe, not just for me, but for anyone who comes too close to the truth. Still, the people of New Jersey and the rest of the world deserve to know what's really happening. The reports of strange drones over New Jersey are not as they seem. These are your average quadcopters or military UAVs. These machines, these things were buried deep underground, dormant for what could be thousands, maybe even millions of years. And now, they've awoken. It began earlier this year, during what appeared to be a routine geological survey near the Pine Barrens. Officially, the team was studying groundwater levels and soil composition, standard environmental research. But their real discoveries were anything but routine. Beneath the sandy soil of the Barrens, they uncovered a massive, buried structure, something no one had ever seen before. The structure wasn't made of rock, metal, or any material we could easily identify. It was smooth, almost glass-like, but with an organic feel, cool to the touch and faintly humming, as if alive. Initially, the team dismissed it as a natural formation, but that explanation didn't hold for long. The surface was covered in intricate geometric patterns, perfectly symmetrical and inscribed with symbols no archaeologist or linguist could decipher. When they finally broke through the structure's outer layer, they discovered chambers, massive, cavernous spaces filled with machinery that had been dormant for untold millennia. Some devices were sleek and pristine, as if sealed away only yesterday. Others showed signs of age, suggesting they'd been abandoned much longer. But none of it appeared human. It wasn't long before the Defense Department intervened. Within days, the site was classified and civilian researchers were escorted out under the guise of national security concerns. Armed guards sealed off the area, and what followed remains one of the government's best-kept secrets. The drones people are seeing now, the ones hovering over neighborhoods and forests, showing up in videos across social media, they aren't experimental aircraft. They're part of what was buried in that structure. They weren't built. They were uncovered. No one knows why these machines are waking up now, but some scientists have a theory. Earth's electromagnetic field has been undergoing subtle shifts lately, fluctuations in strength and orientation that have puzzled geophysicists. It's possible that these changes are what triggered the awakening. Once the machines were exposed to the open air, they began powering up on their own, as if they had been waiting for this moment. This is where it gets chilling. These machines are fully autonomous. They can fly, scan, and even form complex patterns in the sky without any outside input. They don't broadcast on any known frequencies, and every attempt to hack or interfere with them has failed. They don't respond to commands. They simply operate. At first, they appeared to be exploring the terrain, scanning random locations, and moving in unpredictable patterns. But as weeks passed, a pattern began to emerge. The drones started hovering over specific sites, places where no excavation had taken place yet. It's almost as if they know something we don't, like they're marking locations where others like them are still buried. The deeper they dig at the original site, the more machines they uncover. Satellite imagery shows that the structure beneath the Pine Barrens isn't just one building, but part of a vast network. Tunnels and chambers stretch for miles, some filled with more dormant machines, others leading to even larger structures that remain sealed. The question no one wants to ask aloud is this: if these machines are waking up now, what else is buried down there? And what happens when everything wakes up? But the most unsettling detail is what the machines might represent. Their movements aren't random. In fact, they suggest a disturbing sense of purpose. One high-ranking operative involved in the project reportedly said, "These machines weren't made by human hands. Whoever or whatever buried them here is still out there. And if they're waking up now, it's because something is coming. Something we're not ready for." The government's official response is predictable: deny and deflect. They've dismissed the sightings as misidentified weather balloons, experimental aircraft, or even mass hysteria. But that's just a cover story. The truth is they're scared. They don't know who built these machines, what their purpose is, or how to stop them if they turn hostile. For now, the drones haven't attacked anyone, but they've avoided every attempt at capture or interference. They seem content to observe, to wait. But wait for what? The people in charge are out of their depth. They're dealing with technology that defies explanation, and their usual methods of control, secrecy and propaganda, aren't working. These machines weren't designed with us in mind. They don't recognize our authority. So, what happens next? No one is sure. But I do know one thing. They're not just machines. They're scouts. And whatever they're scouting for hasn't arrived yet. Be safe out there. This world may not be ours for much longer. December in Ridgewood was always perfect. Lights adorned every house, wreaths hung on every door, and the crisp winter air carried the faint scent of pine. I loved this time of year, and so did my family. We were unpacking decorations when Emma, my wife, pulled something out from the bottom of the box. It was an old elf on the shelf, its red felt clothes faded, and its painted eyes staring up at her. "Where did this come from?" she asked, holding it up. "Maybe your mom put it in there?" I suggested with a shrug. "Just put it out. The kids will love it." Emma hesitated, but eventually placed the elf on the mantel above the fireplace. "Max and Lily are kids. We're excited." "What's his name?" Max asked. "Jingles," Lily exclaimed, clapping her hands. Emma gave a small smile, though she looked uneasy. Later that evening, as we settled in for the night, she grabbed her phone and read aloud. "There are rules for these things, you know." "Rules?" I asked. "Yeah, it's part of the elf on the shelf tradition. Kids aren't supposed to touch it, or it loses its magic. The elf moves to a new spot each night, and it's supposed to watch the kids to make sure they're behaving. It reports back to Santa." She shuddered. "It's kind of creepy when you think about it." I chuckled. It's just a toy, Emma. Don't overthink it. But I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling, something about those painted eyes that seemed too watchful. The first night, Emma woke me up around 3 a.m. I heard something, she whispered. I groaned. It's probably nothing, but she insisted, so I followed her downstairs. The Christmas tree cast a warm glow across the living room. Everything seemed normal, except for Jingles. Emma froze. Did you move him? She asked. No, I said, frowning. The elf was leaning forward on the mantel. I couldn't recall how Emma had positioned him, but she was certain he hadn't been like that. The kids probably touched him, I said, trying to calm her down. But her unease lingered, and to be honest, something about the way Jingle's eyes caught the light made my skin crawl. 2. At 2 a.m. on the second night, Max woke up screaming. I rushed to his room, with Emma right behind me. He was trembling, tears streaming down his face. It was him. Max sobbed, pointing to the corner of the room. Jingles.
He was here.
He was staring at me. I turned and saw the elf sitting on Max's dresser, its painted grin glowing in the moonlight. Emma looked at me, her face pale. How did it get in here? She whispered. It's just the kids messing around, I said, though there was a hint of doubt in my voice. I grabbed Jingles and took him back downstairs, tossing him onto the mantel. As I set him down, I swear I felt resistance, like his tiny arms clung to my fingers for a moment before letting go. I didn't tell Emma. She was already rattled enough. The next morning, Emma urged me to leave. Something's wrong, Greg, she pleaded. We should go, at least for a few days. I almost agreed just to keep the peace, but when I checked our bank account, I realized leaving wasn't an option. Christmas had drained us, and we didn't have the extra money for a hotel.
We can't just leave the house, I said.
We have to pack, and where would we even go? Emma pressed on. What about my sisters? You think the kids will want to leave all their decorations and presents behind? I countered. Plus, your sister isn't really a fan of mine, so I'd rather not spend Christmas constantly arguing with a brick wall. You're just stressed, Em. It's fine. I'll take care of it. She reluctantly dropped the subject, but the tension in the house was unbearable. At 3 a.m. on the third night, I woke to Emma screaming. I rushed into the kitchen and froze. Merry Christmas was scrawled across the walls in jagged, crimson letters. At first, I thought it was paint, until I saw the bloody paw prints leading to the backyard. Snowball, our cat, lay in the snow, her neck twisted at an impossible angle. Emma collapsed into my arms, sobbing. I called the police, but they found nothing. No signs of a break-in, no footprints other than ours. Absolutely nothing. It's probably just some sick prank, the officer said, though he eyed me with suspicion. When we came back inside, Jingles was sitting on the kitchen counter. His head was tilted slightly, and his smile was wider than before. Greg, we need to leave, Emma said. We can't, I replied, feeling the weight of it all. The cops are already suspicious. And what do we say? That a doll is doing this? They'll think we're crazy. We'll figure this out. The power went out around midnight on the fourth night. I woke to faint, childlike giggles echoing through the house. Did you hear that? Emma whispered, clutching my arm. I grabbed a flashlight and crept downstairs, my pulse pounding in my ears. The beam of light swept across the living room and landed on the wall. Scrawled there in jagged letters was, "He sees you when you're sleeping." My stomach churned. The couch cushions were slashed open, stuffing spilling onto the floor. Then I heard it, a soft scuttling sound behind me. I spun around and froze. At the base of the stairs stood Jingles. He wasn't sitting anymore. He was standing. His painted eyes gleamed in the flashlight beam, and his grin, no longer the harmless smile I remembered, had stretched into a jagged, open maw, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. Emma screamed behind me. By the fifth night, I was at my breaking point. I begged Emma to take the kids and leave, but she wouldn't. "We're not leaving you. We all leave, or none of us do," she said. At 2 a.m., the screams began. I bolted to Lily's room and found her bed empty. The window was wide open, snow blowing in and covering the floor. Outside, small footprints led into the woods. "No," I whispered, panic rising in my chest. "No, no, no." I ran to Max's room. His bed was soaked in blood, the sheets a crimson mess. I staggered backward, ball rising in my throat. "Why are you doing this?" Emma screamed from behind me. I turned to see her staring at the doorway. Jingles stood there, but he wasn't the doll anymore. He was life-sized, his red suit darkened with blood. His painted eyes glinted with malice, and his mouth stretched wider than should have been possible. In one hand, he held a razor-sharp candy cane, the tip dripping with blood. He tilted his head, his painted face twisting into something alive and cruel.
"'Tis the season," he whispered.
I lunged at him, grabbing the fireplace poker and swinging with everything I had. The blow sent him flying into the wall. For a moment, I thought it was over, until I heard Emma scream. I turned to see Jingles standing behind her, his twisted grin even wider. He raised the candy cane high, and I ran toward her, shouting, "No." But I was too late. Her scream was cut short as the light in her eyes faded. I dropped the poker, my hands trembling as Jingles turned toward me, his mouth curling into a silent laugh. I don't remember much after that. Just darkness. When I woke, the house was quiet. Emma was gone. Max and Lily were gone. The only thing left was Jingles, sitting on the mantel, his painted eyes gleaming with satisfaction. And in the corner of the room, I noticed two new dolls, one with Max's brown hair and one with Lily's blonde curls. I stumbled out of the house, tears streaming down my face, with the sound of a high-pitched giggle echoing behind me. I don't know why Jingles came to our family. I don't know what purpose he came with. I just know that the last time I saw him, Jingles was still in that house, and he was waiting for his next family. As a psychologist working at a clinic in Los Angeles, I find myself surrounded by an environment that, at first glance, feels calm and professional. For the past 2 years, I've been immersed in the rhythm of this place, building meaningful connections with both colleagues and patients. The clinic itself is housed in an old city center building, its wide hallways painted in soft, neutral tones. Every patient brought a unique story, each one carrying their own heavy burdens. Among them, one case continues to weigh heavily on me, the suicide of a patient I was treating. The details are too painful to recount, but it's a memory that's etched deep into my mind. Then came the day that upended everything. It was a quiet morning, and I was in my office, going through some notes while waiting for the next scheduled appointment. With over an hour to spare, I took the opportunity to review reports. That's when the phone rang. "Doctor, are you busy?" "Not at the moment." "Why?" "There's a young man at the reception," the receptionist said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "He seems very anxious and is insisting on seeing you. Is this for a session?" I asked. I could hear muffled conversation in the background before she responded, sounding slightly more uneasy. "Yes, he says it's for a session." "Should I send him up?" "Go ahead," I said. After hanging up, I adjusted my chair, trying to shake off the unease that crept in. While I occasionally took unscheduled sessions, it wasn't common for someone to arrive so abruptly. Still, I decided to give the young man the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps he was in genuine need. Moments later, I heard purposeful footsteps in the hallway. I got up to greet the visitor, opening the door to find a man in his early 20s. His eyes were lost, his breathing shallow and uneven. "Come in," I said warmly, stepping aside to let him enter. He moved cautiously, his gaze scanning every inch of the room as though searching for something. Taking a seat across from me, he remained tense, his trembling hands clasped tightly together. "So, how can I assist you?" I asked, notepad in hand. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned forward, staring at the floor, and finally spoke in a voice so soft it was almost a whisper. "Do you believe in things that can't be explained?" Caught off guard by the question, I maintained my professional tone. "Many people have experiences they find unexplainable. Would you like to tell me about yours?" "It's not just a story," he murmured. "It's real. Something is here, right now, What do you mean? I probed gently. He lifted his hand and pointed toward the corner of the room.
There.
Watching us. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my expression calm. What is watching us? Him. He replied with unnerving certainty, his eyes glued to the empty corner.